Good morning on this Friday, January 7th, 2022, and welcome to another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Today and every day, we examine news and information about Black America. This morning, we are re-examining the case of a 7-year-old girl who came home from school late last year, impatient to tell her mother grader said her teacher in Maplewood, New Jersey, had begun to pull off her hijab she wears as an observant Muslim. It's exposing her hair and prompting her to hold on to the head covering. The family's lawyer said that the girl's mother recounted the story on Facebook. Then, an Olympic medalist who fences in a hijab and lives in the same New Jersey school district, denounced the incident on Instagram, where she has 384,000 followers. Soon, the story was cascading across the internet, drawing news crews and police cars to the front of the elementary school as the controversy roiled the liberal suburb. So where is the case now? We speak this morning with the attorney on the case, Let It Be Known's chief legal analyst, Robert Tarver, and Muslim Journal journalist, Katrina Hamilton. But first, let's bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Dr. Chavis, good morning.
Good morning, Stacy Brown. On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the NNPA, Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair, publisher of the Forward Times in Houston, Texas, as well as all of the 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies across America, we are pleased to be a part of this special edition of Let It Be Known.
Well, Dr. Chavis, HBCUs are under threat. Earlier this week, 9 HBCUs received bomb threats. Howard University, Spelman College, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, Norfolk State, Texas Southern, Prairie View A&M, Florida Memorial, North Carolina Central, and Xavier University were among those that received the dastardly threat. The schools ordered evacuations or lockdowns and alerted local law enforcement. It was not immediately clear whether the threats were connected or whether they were racially motivated. By early Wednesday, all of the schools had released all clear notices to their communities, and authorities did not find any bombs, while the FBI said it would continue its investigation. But certainly is suspicious, Dr. Chavis. In one day, 9 HBCUs received bomb threats.
Right, well, obviously it has to be connected, and I'm hoping that the federal authorities will find out who the perpetrators of this dastardly acts, expose them and bring them to justice. Our historically Black colleges and universities are vital to Black America and vital to the United States. And to think that we would start out 2002 with threats of physical harm to our HBCUs, it just shows you that we have to be vigilant. We have to stay on the case. We have to stay on the front line of the civil rights movement, front line of the gathering the resources of the Black church, gathering the resources of the Black press. All of us have to work together. And certainly we all support our HBCUs. So I'm thankful that they did not find bombs. But, we're just like yesterday was the anniversary of, January the 6th. So all these things, these threats, those that are actually carried out and those that are done for intimidation purposes have to be taken very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Chavis, HBCUs have had their share of struggles historically. So this is the last thing that anyone needs, but especially HBCUs who are turning out so much talent. Look, you're an HBCU alum, so we know the type of talent that HBCUs turn out.
Absolutely. And what our HBCUs need is more support from the federal government, more support from state governments, and then all of our alumni. I'm a Howard graduate, and all of us should do more to support our alumni associations. I'm also a former student at St. Augustine's University in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's our family school. So I'm very proud of the progress of our HBCUs, but we need to keep vigilant and be supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Chavis, a new year, new coronavirus term. Many people around the world kicked off 2022 by searching for more information about, quote, flu Rona, after Israel reported that 2 young pregnant women had tested positive for both the coronavirus and the flu. Doctors have long been concerned about the potential impact of a twindemic, with influenza causing cases rising as COVID-19 cases threaten to overwhelm hospitals, and called on people to get flu shots and coronavirus vaccinations. On the other hand, flu Rona refers to when one person has both respiratory infections at the same time, which health officials said is a possibility as cases of the highly contagious Omicron variant of the coronavirus surged this winter across the world. Here's what we know so far. 2 young pregnant women tested positive for the coronavirus and influenza in Israel. Many local and global media outlets did dub it the flu Rona in its headlines. It started with The Sun, a British tabloid that swiftly branded the co-infection double trouble. While the word is relatively new and rising in popularity, cases of flu and coronavirus co-infections are not. They are rare. And flu Rona is not a distinct disease, but refers to when a person has been infected with both viruses. So, Dr. Chavis, is no real need to set off any alarms, but that word is out there and people have questions.
Exactly. Well, we in the NMPA, we're still maintaining our coronavirus task force. And certainly people should take all the proper precautions, follow the CDC guidelines for both the coronavirus as well as flu. We have flu seasons annually, and those who are wise, those who are available, and those upon the doctor's advice should get the flu shot also. We live in a era, not just in America, but throughout the world, where these contagious viruses have to be responded to. And we have to listen to the science. Thank God for our research scientists. Thank God for our medical people and epidemiologists and all the various infectious disease, like Dr. James Hildreth, the distinguished president of Meharry Medical College. All of these brothers and sisters are really working hard to protect the public health. When we say protect the public health, we're not just talking about the health of Americans. We're talking about the health of the world, because that's why we have these pandemics. It's because it starts in one part of the world, it spreads to other parts of the world. So we have to be concerned about the public health of every human being on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Dr. Hildreth is on the board of the FDA, who approves the vaccines. And Dr. Hildreth has many times assured the Black press and others that he would not approve a vaccine that would harm in any way African Americans. And thus, he did help clear the vaccines that we now have. Dr. Chavis, yesterday, Let It Be Known was pleased to bring a special 1-hour broadcast to commemorate the anniversary of the attacks on the U.S. Capitol. We thank everyone for tuning in and thank our distinguished panel who answered the call. In a postscript shortly after the program, President Biden said it was time for America to move forward. In his speech at the U.S. Capitol, President Biden said, "The way you have to heal, you have to recognize the extent of the wound. This is serious stuff. You've got to face it. That's what great nations do. They face the truth, deal with it, and move on." And we have more from the president. Let's take a look at a clip from yesterday's speech.
The nation's capital under siege. This wasn't a group of tourists. This was an armed insurrection. They weren't looking to uphold the will of the people. They were looking to deny the will of the people. They weren't looking to uphold a free and fair election. They were looking to overturn one.
Dr. Chavis, that was just a small clip of the president's speech, but I know you watched the entire speech. Your
Yes.
takeaway from the speech that President Biden gave?
It was welcomed. Number one, I think there are millions of Americans that wanted to see us have a forceful president, a very focused president of the United States, And this was the speech where he took no prisoners, and I think people will welcome it. I think President Biden, Vice President Harris, I think they have to continue that posture throughout the year, not just at the beginning of the year. 2022 is going to set the stage for 2024. And I think we have to continue to make progress to fight the viruses that are out there. But on the other hand, there's some internal viruses in the United States. These repressive right-wing forces that are trying to subvert democracy. They're trying to prevent voting rights. They're trying to prevent universal health care. So all these things need to be addressed. And of course, we must mention criminal justice reform, police reform. There's still too many shootings of our people in many parts of the United States. And some law enforcement officers are finally being brought to justice, but not enough. The vast majority of them get away with perpetrating violence, racially motivated violence on communities of color, and that needs to stop. So, in some, Stacy, President Biden's speech yesterday at the Capitol, where the insurrection took place a year ago, I think was forceful. It was very detailed, and it was very on point. My only response is, thank you, President Biden, for speaking out forcefully. Now we need you to continue that speaking out forceful on all of these issues that affect the quality of life of all Americans going forward.
Yeah, and Dr. Chavis, you know that some of the criticism of President Biden has been that he has not asserted himself, that he's, and some have even termed him a little weak in doing that. But is this a turning point, do you believe?
Well, first of all, I've never subscribed. I don't think he's been a weak president. Keep in mind, both the president and the vice president came out of the United States Senate. The United States Senate, once you're there, particularly as long as he was a senator, your point of departure is always how can you negotiate? How can you establish middle ground? But neither one of them in the Senate now. You're in the White House. You're the president and you're the vice president. And people expect the White House not to be run like the United States Senate. They expect the White House to lead, not just to be the place where you meet people in the middle. No. And I think in terms of a turning point, I think what we're going to see more in 2022 is a not just an attitudinal change, but I think a political change in terms of what does the presidency mean in terms of being not just the commander-in-chief of the military, but the commander of vision, the commander of thought, the commander of response. When President Obama was president, people called him the consoler in chief because there were so many tragedies. He had to try to go console America. Well, now we have an America that's divided, that's racially divided, that's politically divided. This whole debate now, Stacy, about voting rights. And I'm glad that Senator Schumer has indicated that they're going to take a vote. It's time to end the filibuster. It's time to restore voting rights for all Americans. And I think you couldn't ask for a better time than this January.
Yeah, and we know that Senator Manchin of West Virginia is still opposed to ending or doing any carve out for the filibuster. But again, this goes back to the question of the president. Is he now ready, Dr. Chavis? Very little time left when you consider the midterm elections this year. Is he now ready to really use the force of the presidency to get his party in line, to get people like Senator Joe Manchin in line?
Well, absolutely. The answer is yes to your question. I do believe, one of the things I want to remind you, Stacy, you were there in 2020 when it was speculation about whether or not the vice president, the former vice president at the time, would be the candidate and would become president of the United States. And you recall he met with the Black press, and he was very candid. He was very sharp to the point. And of course, I think that coming after Trump, I think that Biden, first year, attempted to establish a difference between the former Trump administration and now the Biden-Harris administration. I think he's done that. But now I think the out front leadership is going to be very, very important. He has the capacity, no question about it. I don't think he's ever really weak. But I would think that messaging, and this is just not for the president of the United States or the vice president of the United States or the Senate or the Congress. This is for all of us, including the Black press. We have to sharpen our messaging. We need to shape the narrative that's in the mindset of Americans in the world as America looks and contemplates its future. Going backwards should not even be on the agenda as an option, and I think that forceful leadership, articulate, crisp, and sharp pointed leadership from the president and the vice president and others in authority is very important. We got a lot of Democratic governors that are, in my view, that need to be more outspoken. Look what just happened in Virginia. We lost the governorship because of not being aggressive enough, and just barely kept New Jersey in the ranks of a blue state. So, the handwriting's on the wall, Stacy. We have to have a fighting posture. Now, let me just say, because I know this is on national news, I'm talking about nonviolent fighting posture, nonviolent social change. Because sometimes the words we use, Stacy, can be misunderstood, particularly when a Black person issues those words.
Well, we know you mean nonviolence. You're a disciple of Martin Luther King. You work with him. So we know where you're coming from, Dr. Chavis. Now we're going to bring on, earlier this year, Katrina Hamilton of the Muslim Journal brought us a case of a 7-year-old Muslim girl who had an awful experience at school. We're going to bring now Katrina Hamilton on, along with the attorney representing this young girl and her family, the Let It Be Known's chief legal analyst, Robert Tarver. Good morning, Katrina, and good morning, Attorney Tarver.
Good morning.
Good morning to both of you. Thank you. We need more freedom fighting lawyers like both of you.
Now, one Katrina, lawyer and one aspiring lawyer, right?
Yeah,
in her late career.
Katrina, we're gonna anoint you a lawyer this morning, as well as being a journalist. But Katrina, you brought us this story. Why don't you and Attorney Tarver, you set the table, and I know you got questions for Attorney Tarver on it. I'm gonna let you go from here.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, Dr. Chavis, I just want to extend my condolences for the loss of your beautiful, beloved sister. I learned so much about her as an educator. So from one educator to another, we are just so grateful for her life, and just again want to wish you our deepest condolences.
Thank you very much on behalf of our family. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so with that said too, as an educator and a mom of a 9-year-old, who is a Muslima, who's a Muslim girl, it's very difficult to learn. It was very difficult to learn about this story and to even hear about the press conference that just took place because, as you all know, this young 7-year-old student was, and I'll let Attorney Tarver give her name if need be, but she was in class and her teacher pulled her hijab, her headscarf off of her head. Just again, to let people know, the headscarf is not a requirement until a young woman reaches of age or, reaches puberty. However, a lot of parents start off their children wearing the hijab at an early age so they can become comfortable. So you see the beautiful picture of her right there. She also grew up in the same area that U.S. Olympic fencer Ibtihaj Muhammad grew up in. So Ibtihaj Muhammad is the sister who actually broke the story and shared with the community how this atrocity happened. So now we're months in, we're into a new year, and this young child is essentially displaying anxiety about not wearing her hijab. She's talking back to her mother when she never did before. Not in, it's not intense, but she's displaying what we call school-based racial trauma and fatigue, right? Because of the fact that this racial traumatic school incident occurred. And we want accountability. We want accountability. Our children go to school so that they can learn and not to be harmed. And as a result, she's starting to wear her hijab now, but if her mother told her that her hijab, her headscarf was her protection. But it's kind of like, okay, well, if the teacher snatched off my headscarf, what are the students going to do? What are my peers going to do? And we know that teachers oftentimes model behavior that students pick up, right? And 78% of the public school teaching workforce is white, female, and middle class. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to for Attorney Tarver, but I will come back.
So we've made the journalist an attorney and the attorney a doctor. So go ahead, Dr. Tarver.
Okay. Well, I always wanted to be a doctor, but look, this is a really interesting story because this is kind of a microcosm of what's happening in America. In this particular case, our client, a young 7-year-old, as like Katrina said, was in class. She'd worn her hijab every day for 35 days prior to this date of this incident. And on this date, the teacher, who was already displaying bizarre symptoms during the day, goes over to our client and pulls it off. The young lady tries to fight. She says, no, that's my hijab. And the teacher, I don't know whether she snapped back or recognized how bad she was acting, but she then relented. And the most bizarre thing, she turns around and she touches the student's hair and she says, oh, your hair is beautiful. As if to say that there is a problem with her covering her hair. And I want to say this, we did some investigation because this is where it really comes down, the rubber meets the road, and found out that this teacher had issues with Black children dating back to 2017. And guess what? The school never documented it. Right. And this happens all the time in our public schools.
Yeah, and Katrina, so what was the reason that the teacher gave?
This is a very complex issue, right? You know, we have to be so careful because we're dealing with intersectionality, what Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw coins as intersectionality. And she is a doctor and a lawyer. She is a doctorate and she's a lawyer by trade or profession. But we're dealing with a young African-American Muslim female, right? And the teacher was white, but she was also Jewish. So there's so many different layers that we're dealing with here when it came to this young lady's hijab. But I will say that it should be pointed out too that while I stated that 76 or 79, between 76 and 78% of our working teaching force is white and female, we also have to understand that this particular district has an African-American superintendent, you know, so there's other nuances.
Go ahead. Right. And the board president as well.
Right. And so, and even in our districts that may be led by African Americans, we often find that they too walk on eggshells for whatever reason. And it's normally not for the advocacy of our children. I cannot answer why she did it, but I can say that when we look at historically as to what has happened, you know, whether it's with George Floyd, whether it's with the 14-year-old in San Diego that I talked about, where her knee was on her neck, there's always the intent or the implicit or racial bias. And I believe Dr. Chavis said too, there's just like this fear, right? It's about fear and resentment. This is a 7-year-old child. What is she going to do? What does her hijab have to do with her learning environment?
You know, Katrina, she actually denies having done anything. But the really interesting thing in this case is that all the other children saw it. And one of the other children that saw this thing was so moved and so frightened by it, another child, that she drew a picture of what happened for her mother. And it's almost like a photograph because the picture that this child drew was one of two hands on the hijab pulling it back. One of the things that your viewers should know is that this is the new battleground in America, our schools. And if we had not disclosed or gotten this information about her prior history, no one would ever know that this is the kind of person that had been teaching in these schools. And I think what I really want people to understand is that so much is being hidden and cloaked in these school institutions that if you are not participating in your board meetings, if you are not following up with your children, if you are not engaged, they're going to put something past you that's going to be very harmful to your children and mine.
And I want to also add to that, and you're right, Attorney Tarver, that it's new to a certain extent. This has been happening since well before Brown versus Board of Education's ruling one, right? But let's just start there because we don't have enough time, right? So when we look at the fact that Brown versus Board of Education's ruling one occurred in 1954, yet it took 2 years for us to be able to begin integration. And when that happened, and Dr. Chavis, you can speak to this, right? But when that happened, there was resentment. There was a fear, right? Our kids were met with sticks, stones, spit. I mean, there was just this trauma and hate. And then once that occurred, and once we fully successfully integrated, if you will, our children were met with a new type of resentment, which were the teachers who were there. And by the way, our Black teaching force was largely dismantled when integration happened. So let's be clear with that. But also, too, you have in the 60s and 70s, these IQ tests that were implemented that was labeling our children as educational, mentally retarded, right? Because they didn't pass these Eurocentric standardized testing. So there's always been hate in our schools. There's always been trauma in our schools, but we as a people spend so much time, and there's so many different issues, right? But we spend so much time on school policing. We spend so much time on reparations. Look, if we want to talk about reparations, let's talk about some land grants, and let's talk about the racial trauma that has historically happened to African people or people of African descent in this country. Our children have been harmed since the beginning in schools. This is not new.
So again, Katrina, certainly every time we have you and Attorney Tarver on, we never have enough time. But Attorney Tarver,
we need an hour.
Yes, we do. Like yesterday's show, right? Attorney Tarver, where's the case now, and what's on the agenda?
We expect to be filing our lawsuit today. We're going to be asking for damages because this child has been damaged. So we expect this thing to move along relatively quickly. But you should know that I've sued this district before. In 2018, I sued the district for purposeful discrimination and segregation in their schools. America's schools are the most segregated schools. The most segregated place in America are our schools. So there's a history with this particular school district. So we're going to move right along and continue to hold them accountable. I do want to say one thing about what I meant when I said that this is the new battleground. What you are starting to see is concerted efforts on the part of right-wing organizations to infiltrate school boards and to take over school policy. Once that happens, they begin to control the curriculum as well as the discipline and everything else in our schools. So that's where we have to now wake up and understand that we are in an entirely different battleground. And that if we don't engage these kind of things, we're going to be left out without a way to be able to challenge even the misbehavior of these people.
Wow. Well, and he's filing today. So folks, you heard it here first. I've read about this and all after Katrina broke it. I've been reading it everywhere else now. And now you hear first that he's filing today. So we're going to follow this. Dr. Chavis, your closing thoughts on this.
Well, again, I salute Attorney Tarver for being on point. He's a great representative of his client, but he's also a great representative and articulator of the broader issue. He's right. This is not an isolated case. This is symptomatic of a problem in America. And I hope it's a call to action to Black parents, to Black people, and to other communities of color. We have to pay attention to what's going on in the public schools. We have to look right now what's going on in Chicago about the debate, whether or not the schools can be open or not. I think that this case can be a pivotal case because if we can get a big judgment that will put on notice all these people that are operating these school systems, not in the interest of communities of color. Last point, the crime of America is accelerating. And you would think then that the public school systems will be much more reflective of the changing demographics. rather than what Katrina said earlier, this fear of change, this fear of the predominance, the inevitable predominance of people of color in America is what in part drove January the 6th last year. It's what in part is going on now at all these state legislatures to prevent people from voting in 2022. So we got a great struggle on our hands, but I'm optimistic. I think that we organize, we mobilize, we have attorneys like Attorney Tarver and journalists like Katrina. We're going to win this battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of quick notes. The sentencing is today for the killers of Ahmaud Arbery. The Black Press will bring you the results of that sentencing later today at blackpressusa.com and many of our member newspapers around the country. A quick personal note. Congratulations. She's watching this morning. My little sister, she is now Dr. Nicole McDaniel. I'm so glad I'm proud to say that she passed her PhD on Monday. We're so proud of her. And don't forget to join the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Midwinter Training Conference, which kicks off on January the 19th. We'll be at the Diplomat Beach Resort in Hollywood, Florida through the 22nd, where the theme is the publishing industry, advancing the Black press of America, reaffirming, engaging, and empowering. The great Stephanie Mills will be with us live. She is going to thrill us all at the conference, a special performance by the great Stephanie Mills. Visit www.nmpa-events.com to register for the conference, and you can reserve your hotel rooms there. We're going to be adhering to strict COVID rules. So let it be known, we will be in Florida and we will be practicing all types of safety. And Stephanie Mills will be with us. Thanks for joining us. Everyone have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday.